Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Thursday, and welcome back to the Huddle. Your look behind the day's top political headlines with three fun and fabulous people: Dan, Sean, and myself. Okay, I'm just going to start with some breaking news overnight because there were a pair of stories from overseas that were quite interesting. Former Prince Andrew, whose birthday is today, by the way, has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. Basically, the local police guys are saying that because of all these Epstein documents coming out, they discovered that he shared some sort of trade secret with Epstein. Makes me wonder if we're going to see other stuff like this as people go through these
Listen,
documents.
it's funny. I've drawn this contrast between how we're dealing with it. I've talked to some Europeans. I don't know that it gets to Starmer, but to a T, every one of them says that Keir Starmer's pretty damaged, potentially fatally. His chief of staff resigned based on the vet that they did of Mandelson. The way that England is handling this is pretty unbelievable. The idea that the king's brother is being rolled up years later shows the extent of it. So I also wonder how much of that permeates over here, where people start saying that the British are holding their people accountable. What are we doing?
Oh, it's all over the place. I mean, that line is beginning to be asked more and more. And particularly when you have King Charles and Keir Starmer both saying, hey, you got to let the law play its course and we're not getting involved. And interesting contrast to
Yeah,
how things are handled here these days. Yep.
Yeah, it's. I'm very skeptical that anything will change here in terms of people and accountability, but we'll see.
Well, don't forget the Clintons are testifying next week. I mean, they're stay tuned.
Yeah, we'll see. Also, overnight, South Korean's leader or ex-leader was sentenced to life in prison. This was after he was impeached for briefly imposing martial law in 2024. He had potentially faced the death penalty. I mean, for all the talk about weaponization and concern about going after political opponents here, the death penalty, my lord, like that's just life in prison.
It's different.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so back here in the U.S., we're gonna hit 5 things today. For our 5, we'll talk about the politics of war and peace. Basically, the president convening his Gaza Board of Peace for the first time in D.C. this morning, as, of course, we could be on the cusp of war with Iran. We'll talk about the president's afternoon trip to Georgia, where he will continue his affordability tour. We'll discuss the Democrats' State of the Union boycott. Obviously, last time around, they very much embarrassed themselves. I wonder, do you agree with that, Dan?
100%. Yeah, I said it. Everywhere. Yep.
Absolutely. Gonna try a new strategy, it looks like. So we'll see how that is shaping up. We'll talk about Democratic infighting on tax policy. There's a huge split between obviously Mamdani and Hochul in New York. And then also in California, Gavin Newsom versus Bernie Sanders on taxes back over in California. And then we'll jump into 2028 Dem politics, Rahm Emanuel versus Gavin Newsom, both making noise in their own way, very sort of different ways. And we'll talk about some latest headlines there. But first, just a quick housekeeping note, guys, a reminder, we will be doing a State of the Union special 15 minutes before the president's speech. We'll be jumping on, talking a little bit about some dynamics we will be watching for. You can watch the show with us, hear us commenting a little bit in the background, and then afterwards we will talk about some of our top takeaways. So that'll be fun. Make sure you join us on that. Quick look at the day book. Kentucky Governor Bashir is going to be speaking at the Center for American Progress. The theme on this is reclaiming the religious mantle from the right. Good luck with that. Did any of you see any excerpts on this? If not,
yeah, I mean, there's a little bit, but I mean, look, it's true to who he is. He's not going to win the razzle dazzle competition, so he's kind of trying to till the land with something that's been a part of his character for his whole career. So we'll see.
It's funny because James Tallarico has sort of done something similar down in
100%.
We don't often hear Democrats talking about religion, so
no, they're often uncomfortable.
I will say this. I don't agree. I saw some of the framing of how he's going to pose this. I fundamentally 100% disagree with it. But from a political standpoint, right? So just hear me out on this, because I think my side sometimes get like I think he's 100% wrong. I don't agree with how he's framing this, but I think it's a
But
smart political move how he's doing this, which is if you're a Democrat, we always talk about Republicans own sort of the national security military zone. Democrats talk about healthcare and abortion. Like for him to go straight at an issue like this, I think is very smart politically. Again, fundamentally disagree with how he's doing it, the approach, the policy, etc. But I think he's very smart because it's a lane that most Democrats won't go in. They're afraid to go at it. And he's sort of making this case that like we Democrats can be equally vocal about religion. And they're trying to recognize that if you can get, let's call it 6, 7, 10% of the people who consider themselves religious to be comfortable with you, that's a big number.
And don't forget, the big topic he's going to focus on is the treatment of immigrants, which the Pope has spoken about. And if you're Bashir, you are looking for ways to hug the base, right? Because you're moderate on so much else where they don't like you. So the idea of wrapping the religious flag, so to speak, on immigration, it's a way to say to the base, I'm with you, but in a different way.
Yeah.
And no one else is doing it, right? I think that's the beauty of what Bashir is doing. He's finding a lane that's pretty open, and he's going to say, I'm going to get in this lane and drive, and nobody else will be in the lane to touch me.
I am curious to see if other Democrats try to do this in the future, because we just don't see it. But just a quick excerpt: Christianity is being hijacked by those celebrating ICE raids, undercutting diversity, cutting SNAP and rural health care, and bullying and demonizing our LGBTQ community. So that's what he's going to say. Just a little bit of a preview there. Right, okay. Back here in Washington, the president, of course, as we said, is going to have his Board of Peace event at 9:00. Some point in the afternoon, he'll be switching gears from foreign policy to domestic, flying to Rome, Georgia. This is going to be Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, obviously a special there to replace her. But this will mostly focus on the affordability piece. He'll be visiting at 150 a local business. I think that's a steel factory, if I'm not mistaken.
A Japanese company that's making a huge investment in the area. Yep.
Right.
Well, and it's also just I say this because this is important. It's not just the investment, but it's a synthetic diamond thing that will counter China's dominance in this market to make semiconductors, et cetera. So it's a dual message here. It's national security, it's foreign direct investment, it's jobs in America. It's a brilliant choice of places and industries to highlight because it hits multiple things at once.
That's actually was one of my questions for you in the segment, but I'll put a pin back into that. We'll return to it. He will also be giving a speech and doing a podcast interview. And I believe Dan had one more flag for the day book. Right, Dan? Something that was sports related.
Yeah, that's right. So
it goes right over my head.
Thank you. I was like, where is she going with this? So for all you NBA fans, the NBA season resumes from the All-Star break. My New York Knicks have a huge game tonight. They are hosting the Detroit Pistons. Been a little bit of the surprise of the NBA. They have crushed my Knicks twice this year. This is the last time they're going to meet. First time in New York. Let's look at Poly markets because who is favored to win the NBA title? Oklahoma City, who won it last year. But right above my New York Knicks, maybe the second biggest surprise in the NBA behind Detroit would be your Boston Celtics. This is not the 80s, ladies and gentlemen. This is today. Sean, are you pleasantly pleased? Jason Tatum's been out with the Achilles.
Yeah.
Your Celtics are right there, and he may come back.
Saw them Christmas week at the Garden. It was awesome. Huge comeback against the Pacers. I'm excited because it's the same trajectory that the Patriots took, which was underestimated at the beginning of the season. Go out there, prove your grit, make it far. Obviously came up short in the Super Bowl, but I mean, lots of promise. I feel the same way about the Celtics. I'd put my money there.
So if you're listening, we got the Thunder, Nuggets, Spurs, Pistons, Cavs, Celtics, and then my New York Knicks. It's been 52 years, I think, since they won. Cautiously optimistic that maybe we change it. So go Knicks tonight.
Wow, that is all over my head, but I'm happy for you guys and your.
Just say yes, Dan.
Yes, Dan. Actually, yes, Dan. Can you take the lead?
Oh yeah, sure.
So
our favorite Cozy Earth. Sean talks about the joggers. Rachel's talked about it. I've talked about it. But there's another thing that you need to think about here. Yes, we have St. Patrick's Day coming up and stuff. But a reminder, the weather is about to change. And in our household, in the winter, we do the heavier sheets, the heavier cotton ones from Cozy Earth. But as the weather starts to get a little warmer, it's going to be 50 degrees here later in the day. If you don't have them, get the bamboo sheets, because now you've got sheets that can, for those cold nights when a little bit of draft maybe is coming in the bedroom. But now you want the cooler ones for the warmer weather. Nothing worse than waking up a little sweaty, a little uncomfortable at night. Cozy Earth sheets, they are the best. Go to CozyEarth.com, use the code HUDDLE for up to 20% off. But again, they've got clothing, they've got sheets, they've got candles. We cannot say enough good things. And we've never had somebody reach out to us and say, you're full of you-know-what. The products are terrible. It's always the opposite. You guys actually are right. So once again, yes, Dan.
Thanks to Cozy Earth. And yes, Dan, totally agree on that. Okay, let's jump into the politics of war and peace. As we said at the top, the president's going to be convening a bunch of foreign leaders here in DC to talk about peace in Gaza. And we expect, we expect some of these leaders to pledge up to $5 billion to rebuild Gaza and thousands of peacekeepers to sort of help on the ground. But the big but here is that all in the background is the situation with Iran and the mass sort of buildup of U.S. assets in that region and the expectation that we're probably going to be bombing them pretty soon. So let's start there, because these two things happening at the same time. Sean, how does what we're expecting to happen in Iran impact, what's going on with the board of peace, if at all?
I don't think at all. I mean, I think everybody wants to tie them two together and talk about the ironies. They're two very different situations. I mean, I actually find some of the narrative fascinating. It's like, we're having a meeting about rebuilding Gaza, but therefore we can't strike Iran that poses a massive threat. I mean, to me, it's like somehow if you're talking about peace, then therefore you can't do anything to take out additional threats, which is the silliest peacenik thing I've ever heard. So, look, I think this is a made up narrative. I think both are making progress. The board of peace thing is a positive thing. It's outside the box, which I think is great. It's not relying on the same old tried and true failed policies that have done nothing in the past. I hope the president and his team are successful in this. Not just bringing peace, but kind of showing a new way forward and how to address certain problems in foreign policy. And then in Iran, I mean, one of the things that there's two aspects of what's happening that I think are going below the radar. Number one, all the assets in the region are naval. And what I mean by that is you've got a lot of firepower from subs and from planes that can get dropped, but you're not talking about a follow-on ground force. So that, to me, is where one of the things that's so interesting about when people discuss what's going on. You're not bringing massive, we call them LHDs in the Navy, like Marines, or you're a bunch of Army platoons over ready to invade on the ground. This, to me, is the biggest tell as to what's happening, which is it's going to be a lot of surgical kind of strikes by air. Go in, drop stuff, take assets out, take runways out, take military sites out, take government facilities out. But if you were going to do anything more, you'd have to have a ground force ready to come in, staging somewhere, and they're not. So that's number one. Number two is the buildup.
Just pause. I want to come right back to Iran, but first I want to get Dan. Do you agree that these two things are separate? You can do both and be successful. And there is no question that the president has been successful, as Sean was saying, in Gaza, right? I mean, a lot of things could change, but do you think Democrats give him any credit for what he did with the board of peace?
I think those are two separate issues. I think they grudgingly give him credit for what he's done in Gaza, but they laugh at the board of peace. I mean, it's really a board of dictators. Like and if you think about the bigger countries with the most amount of money, most of them are not there. Where I think this does tie into Iran, though, because this is where I think people are looking, is there are countries that are there. I think it's Turkey, Hungary, and some Middle Eastern countries that are vocal opponents of what he is rumored to be thinking about for Iran. So the question is, if you go into Iran and it's a multi-week campaign, and again, we're going to talk about Iran and kind of all the questions that are out there. What if these countries say, you know what, time out. We really didn't want you to do this. They've got domestic politics to think about, right? We are going to take a timeout in Gaza. Now, that would be a problem for Trump. I don't think they would fully walk away. It might be like they take a 2-month timeout, but any delay on the ground is problematic for, actual reconstruction and security there. So I do think the two are related. And I think if we want to kind of transition here to Iran, I think the fascinating thing for Democrats, for the country, is when we went into Venezuela, there had been all this buildup. The Wall Street Journal was talking about it, the New York Times, of like, holy cow, there are a lot of assets. Holy cow, they're sitting around. The CIA is on the ground in Puerto Rico. There's lots of officers. So if you were reading and you knew where to look, you saw all the signs. But what there was no discussion of is, what are we trying to do down there? Like, remember, it was drug cartels. Then it kind of morphed into a bigger regional play and oil. What I think is kind of fascinating is there's increasingly, like, the rest of the media is now saying, oh my God, we may go into Iran. We have no idea what our goals are. The country has not been educated whatsoever, not only about what our goals are in the battle, but what are our commitments for the day after. And that's where I just think, boy, if you're Trump, Sean, you are running it. And I think I know why he does this, because he doesn't like to be pinned down. So if you don't tell people what our goals are and you don't tell people what the commitments are, you keep maximum flexibility. And if it goes well, great. But boy, I think he's running a huge risk here. The country's not conditioned for this.
Well, that I will say that you're right on that. The idea is normally when you do a buildup, like the why, right? Which is, basically they pose a threat, and you've got to have stability in the region with people who've got access to nuclear capabilities. But for the average person walking down the street, and again, this isn't an insult to anybody. It's just, if you're not focused on this kind of stuff because you're doing, you're living your life and working hard, you're sitting there probably saying, I'm sorry, I heard something about Iran and second carrier group going in, and like, what are we doing?
2-week campaign.
Right. But you're right. In Venezuela, Venezuela, I did the buildup was great, right? Which is they pose an existential threat in terms of the drugs that are coming in, the lives that are lost in it. And that was a good buildup. I think that's part of the reason why, though, Dan, what you're hitting on is when we talk about why hasn't he acted quicker? Why hasn't, because I think that they understand what's about, like, the political consequences of doing it, right? And that's what I think. The president is so in tune with messaging and what's happening, and it's not that he understands. I have to be president, and when there's threats, I have to address them. I can't just ignore them because I need to focus on the economy. But at the same time, he does understand that this is not a huge win, politically, to be dealing with this, but he's got to do with it, so this is where I think the balance comes in of, when you're president, there's things that, don't go on schedule to how you want them, but you have to deal with them.
That actually segues perfectly to the second half of the segment that I wanted to get to, which is like the political, what are the political ramifications of this? I mean, put aside national security for a second, you've got the midterms. I could see this galvanizing parts of the base, at least. But does it fire up the left? Like, what is the midterm impact?
I think it could be huge, because the question is what happens, right? So Venezuela was a 3-hour surgical masterclass, right? We got out. There was a little bit of carping, obviously, on the left, a little bit on the right. But, like, by and large, within a week, people had kind of moved on and kind of grudgingly stopped talking about it on the left. No, I mean, just to be kind of,
No,
by the way, it became more popular too. If you looked at the polling over time,
Correct. As oil came back and people kind of saw, no blood on the ground, so to speak, of American soldiers, and no real cost to the taxpayer per se. And I know people disagree with that statement, broadly speaking. But here's where I think this is fascinating. If it's a multi-week campaign, right? Iran supports the proxies over across on the other side there with Hamas and Hezbollah, and there's the whole issue of Gaza and the treatment of the Palestinians. I think the question is, if there is a response, it hits Israel. Israel gets angry and retaliates. Now you're peeling open, both on the right, the question of why is time and resources going, into the Middle East, and on the left, it could reopen this whole thing of supporting Israel unconditionally, having Israel's back unconditionally. It could really play an impact. We have a primary coming up in Michigan. We have a primary coming up in Maine. I'd be very curious how Gabe Plattner, a former vet, would talk about this stuff. And we haven't talked in a long time, not just us, but the country. All those Iraq veterans that are now in policymaking positions in both parties, J.D. Vance, who served, right, Jason Crow, all these people. Boy, this is going into the lion's den again.
Sean, what do you make of the midterm ramifications here? Because it could also be a distraction from the affordability piece, right?
Totally.
Oh, not only that, I'll take it from the opposite, which is I can't tell you a good thing that comes of this.
Wow.
Right? I mean, like you strike Iran, to Dan's point, with the exception of like foreign policy hawks, like how many people are paying attention and saying, hey, it's just not something that is in our daily purview of thinking about, like, how does Venezuela, the administration sold very well, right? The idea of oil and drugs coming to our country. I get it. It helps our economy. It keeps us safer. The two things that I always say everything is predicated on: your personal safety, your economic security. Boom, boom. It hit it perfectly. What is the rationale that you're going to tell the American people? So even if the precision is great, right? After the B-2 strike, the Tomahawk strike 6 months ago or whatever, I think he got a lot of credit for it, right? People were like, and I will tell you from a military standpoint, they will talk about that at the war colleges in Carlisle and Newport for years and decades about what a beautiful and precision-based strike that was. But tell me that the average American walked down the street and said, did you guys hear about Iran? What a great strike that was. And like, I don't see the political upside. I see a lot of potential downside. Right. And that's why I was saying that there's part of the reason there's not a ground force is that the president in particular, and obviously the vice president as well, are very, very aware. Dan brought up Iraq. I mean, they're sensitive. The president loves to say, I didn't start wars, I ended them. He's not like, they get this more than anyone else. And I think that there is a lot of risk and there's a lot of reason why every time somebody says, why haven't they striked? Because they get it.
Yeah. Let's move on to Georgia. So Chief of Staff Susie Wiles said a couple of weeks ago that the president is going to be making weekly trips around the country to talk about affordability ahead of the midterms. He's back on the trail this afternoon. So this district is obviously a red district, but Georgia itself, very much an important state for the Senate in the midterms, right? You got John Ossoff, who is, defending his seat. Increasingly, Republicans are worried if they can actually take it back. But the president does have some good news today, Sean, in terms of talking about the economy, right? Just last week, we had a good jobs report, good inflation numbers. How much do trips like this to states like Georgia, how much do they actually impact what happens on the ground in campaigns?
I think there's two things. One is obviously local media will cover it. So it's a big deal. As I said, the beautiful thing about the place that they've chosen is it's not just, hey, we've got this Japanese investment, several $1 million of this factory, but it's the counter to, like, you're a part of something. We're countering China. We're bringing in some AI capabilities, to address semiconductors, blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's a great message. So I think for local media, it's really good. And the other thing is it gets people fired up. Yep. The idea that the president's in there, I'm sure he's going to talk politics and talk about that race in particular. There's obviously a very contested Senate primary to take on Warnock, but it gets the base a little fired up. And I think so it's a dual thing.
That I was going to say, speaking of fired up on the other side, Dan, do Democrats like dread when the president comes to the state doing things like this? Or are they like, great, come on, welcome in, let's fire up our own base?
Yeah, I think it's both, because I think what's fascinating, and you saw this in a couple different places today, is on some level where Trump is going is the quintessential example of the conundrum he's facing, which is the local chamber of commerce says business is great, right? The Japanese investment, huge win for him. We didn't really talk much about it earlier this week, but Japan is starting to follow through on their commitments to spend in the United States. Great success story for Donald Trump. But the flip side is all of these stories or anecdotes in the stories of people in this district saying costs of everyday goods are unaffordable. And so for Democrats, what you're saying is it's kind of okay, our story without much effort on our behalf of the affordability crisis is appearing in these stories. So business is good. Wall Street, Fortune 500s, AI, crypto, well, crypto not right now, but, kind of booming. Main Street struggling. And that's the frame that I think they want. The other thing is, I can't overestimate enough, and I've heard this from a few Republicans, there's a little bit of a weary eye at the White House watching Jon Ossoff right now. Not just because he is leading that Senate race and their Republicans are struggling to kind of get organized on their own side, but there are more and more whispers that Ossoff may turn around and run for president.
Interesting.
And he's young. If he wins twice in Georgia, it's a huge state that's obviously caused Trump, the White House, headaches. I don't think it's an accident that they're going down there, and I bet you a lot of money Ossoff's name will come off his lips.
Sean, have you heard much about that? How much of a threat do you think he is?
I don't think
both in the Senate and presidential.
Yeah, so I don't think he's a threat, but the Barack Obama story should be one that we remember, right? Which is,
of course,
you the idea. I've always said sometimes when you're running a presidential race, we've talked about this before, Dan and I. Sometimes you have a tendency to run the last race. Dan mentions this a lot with Newsom in particular, but you also have a tendency to look at the crop the same way. Like, okay, here are the runner-ups, and you miss the up-and-comers that are going to shoot the moon. If Ossoff were to win and win handily in Georgia, I think he'd have a strong case in the Democratic Party to say, hey, guys, look, I just did this twice, kind of the way that Bashir's trying to do it in Kentucky. But look, I did it twice in Georgia. I know what I'm doing. I've got a campaign infrastructure. And he'd be coming off of a race where he has the infrastructure around him, if you will, right? So it's sort of like coming right off the end of a season where you're still in shape, you're ready to go, and you can keep taking swings, hits at bat. He's ready to go, whereas Bashir's like a couple of years out of his last election. Not that that's a big deal, but you're fresh, you're ready to go. You're like, let's keep it moving. Yeah. I think he'd have a strong argument, and I think that the media in particular would give him would give him sort of a lot of attention because they're always looking for that next story, right? And so I would suggest, if I were Ossoff's team and you ended up winning, planting that story and allowing that to see what grew would be a smart move.
Yeah, and I think I'll call his people.
Don't forget too, when you're running,
he's got to win first.
When you're running a presidential, not just the candidate, you tend to go recruit the staff that had just done the big races the last cycle. So famously, James Carville, Paul Begala, they had done the Pennsylvania gubernatorial, right? And down in Georgia, they had just done the Georgia Senate race. So Bill Clinton got him, David Axelrod and David Plouffe. What did they do in 2006? The independent expenditure for the DCCC. They knew on the ground data and they had hand-to-hand combat experience that they rolled in. The Clinton team in 2008 had not done races. The only one was Mandy Grunwald, who was doing ads in Minnesota. But having not only a candidate who's taken batting reps, but staff that has gone toe-to-toe against the right and the White House and MAGA, can't underestimate that value.
That's really good insight. Okay, guys, let's move to Democrats' State of the Union boycott. So,
oh boy,
yeah, last time around was an embarrassment. I remember staying up late into the night writing about Democrats, just totally like distracting from everything. Al Green's protest, shaking his cane, getting escorted out, the silly little paddles they had that just frankly looked pathetic. Well, this time around, it sounds like some Democrats are trying a new strategy. They're going to be completely boycotting the speech and attending an alternate event called the People's State of the Union. That's going to be on the National Mall near the Capitol. It's being hosted by MoveOn.org, an outside progressive group, Medias Touch, which is this new media, very progressive outlet, a bunch of Dem podcasters, Joy Reid. They're going to have Dem lawmakers speaking and blasting the president on healthcare and the economy, and bringing also immigrants who are targeted by the administration. Now, look, we've seen
illegal immigrants, by the way.
That was not specified in the stories, but that would not be a great look, I don't think, for Democrats. But I digress. I want to start with Dan here because we have seen Dems boycott the inauguration before, but this is a different level.
Yeah.
Like, aren't there some risks to just being like, oh, we're not going to show up?
Yeah, I think it's terrible. I mean, my plea to the party is don't do this, because I think it's twofold. I think, one, you're going to end basically the State of the Union as we know it, which, okay, maybe the American people don't care. But what will happen going forward is the opposition will just simply say, I'm not going to attend, right? Because they didn't do it to Trump. And this year it's maybe 30 or 40. And the next year it'll be 100. AOC announced she's not going to go now. You also have some Democrats who are not adhering to Jeffrey's, thing that if you come, sit on your hands, if you don't have anything nice to say, they're like, no, we're going to cause a little bit of trouble. And I think if the image, look, we have momentum right now. We have had a good start to 2026 politically. This is one of those events where most of the country tunes in, okay? If the images are of us kind of having this like out of control rah-rah down the street, petulant members on the floor interrupting and banging or whistles or whatever, and then a leader who looks like an impotent, know-nothing sitting on his hands, I think the average voter, just as they're not paying attention to Iran, says, Jesus, you guys are a bunch of immature idiots. Yeah. And then it goes to who's more extreme, Trump and his policies or us and our knuckleheads. And so if I were the party, show up, sit there, stand up, when he walks in, stand up if they have a little kid with cancer. And otherwise, if you don't like his policies, just sit there. Yeah. That's it. Be adults.
Yeah.
That'd be my plea. I'm not going to listen, but
in some ways it feels like you can just feel the frustration steaming off Democrats when President Trump is up there doing these sorts of speeches. And the reason is because he's good at this. Let's be honest. He is good at this. He puts on a show. Yep. I remember one of the State of the Unions, he's bringing in so-and-so's husband is coming back from, a far off place. They haven't seen each other in 3 years. Oh my gosh, there's this reunion. There's this little kid who's getting, such and such an award who, battled cancer. He's good at this. And that's why you see like people like Pelosi, like ripping up the speech because she just couldn't stand it behind him. Sean, what Republicans?
He's a little liberal with the truth, which is what enrages them. And that's where, but look,
all politicians are, let's be honest. Of course. Yeah, Sean, of course, Republicans would love it if Democrats make fools of themselves.
Yeah, two things. One, I was at the White House yesterday with the president for his speech at Black History. And I'm telling you, to your point about owning, like the people that they brought in to talk about how the president's policies, whether it's the First Step Act, no tax on tips, it was unreal. They killed it with this event yesterday, and the president was on fire. And I say that because whether you disagree with him wholeheartedly, the biggest MAGA supporter, what you just said, Rachel, is so perfect, right? He knows how to produce an event. His team around him, Lynn Patton, put the event together yesterday, and it was spot on. The point is that they are this State of the Union. I've said this before. This is the one time when like everybody gets a shot at the apple, and like so it's the best of ideas and anecdotes and things like this. It's going to be good. I'm just going to tell you, and I'm not. I also will say, and I'll save this for when we go live, but like, remember, and I've said this about Obama, I even said it about Biden, like reading a speech and doing it, like Biden gave a couple speeches that I thought were okay, but it's like, okay, well, you gave a speech, you read a teleprompter, let's not overdo it. But Trump knows how to play to the camera better than anybody. And this will be in him. Frankly, the biggest concern they should have is that people know how good he is and that are the stakes too high, that he has to hit them. But secondly, I will just leave it at this. I agree with Dan. If the Dems want to be a little bunch of babies, it'll rip, it'll turn so many people off. Agreed. But there's this competing issue. When Joe Wilson yelled, "You lie," back to Obama, okay, I think the number was something like $2 million in 24 hours that his team raised. Yep. And I'm sure Al Green had some kind of huge outpouring of support from the left. Like, as much as the leaders hate it, there is a reward for this among the bases of each party. And that's the issues that Hakeem Jeffries is trying to say. Hakeem Jeffries, have to worry about everything. You have to worry about you and how much money you raise and how awesome you will be among your base. But there's competing interest, and that's the problem that they have.
Yep.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to Dems tax policy infighting. So obviously, National Democrats trying to unify ahead of the fall's midterms, and largely they have in terms of going after Republicans. But there's one issue that is very much dividing them: tax policy at both ends of the country. In California, you have this proposal to levy hefty taxes on billionaires, and it's creating this war between Bernie Sanders and Gavin Newsom. Sanders traveled to Los Angeles yesterday to campaign for this proposal, and Newsom is among the most outspoken opponents of this, saying that it could sort of leave the government's financial situation in a worse position, and that it could, drive out businesses from the state. And then in New York, Mamdani apparently issued this ultimatum to Governor Hochul yesterday, vowing to raise property taxes by 10% if she fails to comply with his income tax increase on the wealthy. Dan, where do we even start with this one? Obviously, the populist base loves this idea, raising taxes on the wealthy. Do you think that, these more centrist Democrats ultimately end up bowing to this pressure?
I don't know. I mean, I think this is going to percolate both 2026 and the midterms in our primaries if we were to win, and then in 2028, because what you have increasingly is the kind of campaigning versus governing. And the problem that the party is facing is that 20 years ago, if you wanted to be in Hollywood, or you wanted to in the TV industry, or you wanted to be in the tech industry, you had to go to Silicon Valley or Los Angeles. You wanted to work on Wall Street, you had to go to Wall Street. And they could raise your taxes or lower your taxes, but you were kind of stuck because that is where your industry was. Today, because so many of these services and capital are mobile, these leaders, Gavin Newsom, Kathy Hochul, who has to think broader than just New York City, say to themselves, if we raise taxes, we already have a high tax rate, it's already problematic. If we raise it even more, both the wealthy, who are the base of our individual tax base, or the companies will move to Texas or Florida or Tennessee, or these either no income or corporate tax or very low tax rates. And so they are pleading with the base to stop this stuff. But you had Bernie Sanders showing up. The unions are pushing it because the alternative is potentially a cut in services. And in New York City, Mamdani is using every tool in his tool belt to try to, intimidate and browbeat down the governor, who is also up for re-election next year, mind you. So I think this is going to be huge. It putting Gavin Newsom in an uncomfortable position. I think every 2028er who goes to LA to raise money, or San Francisco, you better believe they're going to be asked. Everyone who goes to New York City to raise money is going to be asked. It's going to be a big battle in our party. Now, I don't know who's going to come out the winner.
Look, I'll just say this. Yesterday, it was announced that Boeing is moving out of Virginia back to St. Louis,
right?
Showing how quick Abigail Spanberger has destroyed the Commonwealth of Virginia in such epic amount of time. And to Dan's point, there are consequences to these crazy policies. Virginia has gone from being a very friendly place to do business and to live to now having businesses. And I can't tell you the number of people who said, I'm not sure, I don't want to raise my kids if this is what it's going to look like anymore. And so these policies may be popular with a base, but what Abigail Spanberger has done in less than 30 days to destroy Virginia should be a warning to every Democrat, including New York, which how quick you can destroy a state and a state's reputation. And
she hasn't passed anything. It's been proposed.
Well, I was going to say,
actually, Dan, she has passed some stuff. So that's actually
she can't pass tax legislation on her own. She needs the
legislature. No, and the legislature's already voted. So yes, they actually have voted.
Both of them have passed, and it's into law.
A couple, there's like 3 of them that have, not the whole tax on Uber and tax on delivery, but they've already gone through 3. They've done a gun grab. They've watered down. I mean, like they're on a roll.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Did Boeing, what was the reason they cited? Did they cite taxes for leaving Virginia?
I've got to go down the rabbit hole a little bit more, but the bottom line is it's not a good look. I mean, Glenn Youngkin, just, whether or not he was successful or not, made 4 years out of bringing and courting businesses to come here, which is jobs, obviously. And it's
so did Terry McAuliffe. Yeah, with Amazon.
But I mean, they got it. Again, the one thing about McAuliffe and even Warner and Kane is, from a gubernatorial standpoint, they people who are on my side didn't really like them, but they understood the importance of businesses, especially tech in Northern Virginia.
They did a good job. Just say
I can't.
They did not do a bad job.
Have we seen, and Dan, you probably know this, better than Sean, because you're following a lot of these frontline Democrats, but like, are any of the frontline Democrats embracing the sort of tax the wealthy push that we're seeing right now?
Frontline for 2026 or 2020?
Yeah, or 2028. I mean, just like, yeah, like it's.
Well, look, I mean, you are having these. So think about Maine, right? Where you have the governor who has, her record, and you have a kind of firebrand young candidate who is much more progressive. Look at, I mean, these are the battles that we are having in our primaries all over the country. It is about, Medicare for all versus kind of our chipping around the edges to reform the Obamacare, whether to raise taxes. Tom Steyer, who's going to ran for president, going to run for governor, he wants a ballot initiative up in 26 to raise taxes on the rich, right? Look, there's a reason Donald Trump thought about this, because he knows it polls well. But you also know the reality is it does cause challenges, particularly for states, because, again, you can leave.
Yeah.
You can simply pack up and leave.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that is the problem that, again, it's easy campaigning to say tax the rich. It's
Yeah,
just,
and it looks terrible if you're running for 2028 and all. You have to look at all the
But you-
businesses
the
that
damn
left your
thing, you
state
look
when
at-
you were governor.
You look at what's happening among industries. They're not confined to where they were. Look at Alabama. Suddenly that's become this defense hub down in,
Huntsville.
Thank you.
Yep.
But like these areas, like there's been massive shifts in terms of where people have to work based on industries, based on tax policy. There's a lot of shift. Obviously, you look at the massive migration of companies out of California to Texas in particular.
Yeah.
These guys have to worry about that. And
Palantir's moving to Florida. They announced yesterday they're moving to Miami.
yeah. So, it's easy to say it. It's another thing when everyone goes, well, wait, what happens to all my jobs and all in the tax space? Because that's the corporate guys are paying a lot of the fare and covering a lot of the, the infrastructure and the things that you don't think about. That corporate tax covers a lot of money.
And for all my progressive friends who scream like, so what? It's outrageous. Just think about this. Wall Street is going to have their best year ever. Mondani's administration, not the Wall Street Journal, the Mondani administration estimates that Wall Street individuals are going to pay $5 billion in taxes on their bonuses this year. His deficit that they think they have was halved by one industry's bonuses this year. So if you may say, well, screw them, they make too much money, they will leave.
Yeah. Okay.
They'll move to Miami.
Let's move on to our final segment, 2028. So Rahm Emanuel has this new op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, the Dunroe Doctrine's Year of Failures. He says, far from securing the U.S. sphere of influence, the White House accidentally buttressed Beijing. I understand Rahm, he has, foreign policy muscle he can flex, which is quite contrary to what we just saw with AOC when she was in Munich.
And Whitmer.
And Whitmer, sure. But I have to be honest, when I was reading this op-ed, like I had to read some paragraphs like 3 times because it was like so dense. And I was like, okay, like Dan, like do Democratic base voters, do they actually care about this stuff?
So it's
with respect to Rahm, who wasn't a governor.
So look, to me, this is really shaping up as a little bit of a classic Tortoise and Hare, which is Rahm is waking up every day and methodically chipping away. So we all laughed about AOC, Whitmer, and to some extent Newsom, right? He's talking about climate change and like he's temporary, but it wasn't really, yes, that's serious stuff, but it's not, Rubio gave a tour de force of true intellectual foreign policy vision, right? Along with JD Vance. Rahm, I talked about Bashir trying to hug the base. Rahm is saying, look, all this noise, Iran may be out there. I don't think it's accidental that this came out around the same time. China, ladies and gentlemen, China. He's banging the drum. He's able to say, look, all this smacking of Europe, which enrages Democrats. Again, Sean can laugh about that, and people can. But he's like, he's driving them to China. He's letting Xi off. It's Rahm's way to hug the base. It's serious. It's strong. It's coherent. He looks like an adult compared to the others who look like children on the world stage. And Rahm is just chipping away. He's not in the headlines, but people who thought, no way, never, too old, too moderate, too Wall Street, too this, too that, they're all beginning to say, I'm keeping an eye on Rahm because everyone else is moving around. And so I thought it was really, and it's authentic. The Biden administration got angry with Rahm when he was ambassador to Japan because he taunted the Chinese a lot, right? And so we always talk about 80-20 issues. Smacking the Chinese is a 90-10 issue in our politics.
Yeah.
And he's really smart about it. So I get it. No one's paying attention now, but he's laying markers down. That's what he's doing.
Mostly my question, mostly I'm wondering, is he must be talking about this. I agree. I think this whole thing about, it's not just, criticizing the president for going after European allies because, we're pearl clutching and that's just not what we do. This argument that it's about China or driving people into the arms of China, that very smart, but like, who's reading the Wall Street Journal op-ed?
This is where I was going to go.
Donors and elites.
You just see.
But you can't win if you're just making an argument to donors and elites. You got to, especially with him.
But you don't. But
get to the base.
But he does do I mean, that's the thing. He goes and talks about social media. That hits moms in particular. People who are out there every day dealing with their kids on devices. He talks to again. Part of what you need to do is think about. Like I say this all the time. There are tactics and or there are strategies of which tactics make pieces. Part of a strategy. Rahm knew what he was doing. To your point, Rachel, you can be a little bit more highfalutin when you're in the Wall Street Journal. You're talking to a class that's basically saying, "Hey, rich people, I actually know what I'm thinking. I've got some ideas. This is a foreign policy. This is the stuff that you people talk about at your cocktail conversation and your board meetings. And I'm the guy for you, right? Everyone else, like I have these chops. These knuckleheads that went over to Munich don't know what they're doing. Listen to me. I've got a plan. I've actually been around a few times." But I remember back in my USTR days when we were having this discussion about how trade support was attriting. And I made the point that like the average blue collar worker in a factory isn't waking up reading the editorials in the Wall Street Journal. Yeah. That's not like they're working up, busting their butt, trying to figure out, okay, how do I get to work? How do I get back? How do I pick up the kids from practice or get them to their piano lesson or whatever it is? They're not like, hey, did you read the editorial in the Wall Street Journal? And we had missed the boat in understanding of meeting people where they were, right? Instead of maybe going to the Detroit Free Press that they probably did read more if you were in Michigan or whatever. Rahm gets it. He's like, okay, this issue goes to this person. This issue goes to that person. That's a strategy. And that's the difference. When I talk about teams being around somebody that understand how to put a campaign together, you don't just fire pot shots in the dark and go, I hope it lands. You think about what you're doing and who the intended audience is. And Rahm at least is the one guy that gets this.
And where was Rahm last week when everyone was in Munich? Rahm was in Iowa visiting manufacturing factories, got great local press. Just he is the Hare. The tortoise. He's the tortoise. I also want to just flag for people who didn't see this. Gavin Newsom yesterday met with Elizabeth Warren briefly. She was in California to endorse Katie Porter, who was her former law student at Harvard. There's an interesting dynamic in our party between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. They're friends and they're kind of frenemies. You remember in 2020, they did not, they ran against each other and they had a couple of fiery moments, but they always tried to hug it out and say we're friends. Sanders is associated with AOC. Who do we not talk about anymore? Elizabeth Warren. Where does Elizabeth Warren go from here? Right? She was CFPB director. It was kind of a disaster. She went to the Senate. She's going to, she had a fine career, but hadn't really done much. What if she were to go in with Gavin Newsom? Because what is his Achilles in the primary? He has Achilles in the generals, California. His Achilles in the primary is the base doesn't trust him. They think he's a chameleon, right? Now he's repaired that a little bit with his tactics online and stuff. But it's interesting that he may be courting the senator from Massachusetts, because I would imagine she would love the opportunity to be the progressive star while the other two are over there.
Plus, he could shore up all of the fake Native American vote.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Big Ten coalition.
Ding, 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 ding. Big Ten.
Just keep going.
Oh, that was good.
Okay, guys, let's take some questions. We're at time there. Okay, here's from X. Okay, Wayne asks, talk about the trade deficit going up in the latest reports and Trump declaring the defector has gone down 76% since he initiated tariffs.
The defector. I'm not sure what
I'm not entirely sure what that refers to, Wayne. My understanding is the trade deficit is down.
Yeah, I think it is, and some of that has to do with the dollar too. I don't. I mean, look, I think with so much of this stuff, whether it's the trade deficit, tariffs, there is news for both sides to point to, and I think that Trump has some really good stuff to start saying, and he's got some real worries about stuff that's stubborn, and I think that the question is, which way does it kind of the seesaw begin to lean more in the next 5 to 6 months? I think Sean says it very clearly, it's either going to be better or it's not, but the chips are on the table now.
Yeah, two things. Look, and I say this as a former assistant U.S. trade rep for 3 years, that like the trade deficit ranks to me somewhere like 5,000 on the scale of what people care. I mean, like even most, like a lot of economists don't point to that as a huge economic indicator of where things are going or how things are doing. Different people have different interpretations of whether it's a net positive or a net negative. Because of the flow of goods and whether or not manufacturing in particular is doing well. That being said, I mean, look, I think the bigger news right now in terms of trade deficit and all of this is we are, I'm going to guess, I'm trying to think, tomorrow's Friday. I think it'll be we're starting to really narrow the window on when the court, probably Tuesday.
Could be tomorrow. Could be tomorrow. They're
saying.
Yep.
And if not, I mean, I think this is where it's interesting. The court tries not to be political, but we've talked about this before. If the court is thinking about decisions, especially something as monumental as this, and or birthright citizenship or Voting Rights Act, to do it on the heels of the State of the Union, I mean, this to me, I think as much as you say, there is something about them trying not to look political, injecting themselves right before the biggest speech of the year. I don't know.
We don't know for sure that they'll do it though.
No, we don't. It's just
no. They can punt, but I'm just saying, like, there's nothing that says it. But they made it clear when they took both of these cases, in particular, actually all three of them, that they were giving them an expedited review. Well,
that was months ago.
You would assume that would have been right at the beginning of the session,
right?
And obviously, they've got all the way till June, July. But I'm just saying, it's.
So Sean, where on the awkward scale would it be if they were to strike down the tariffs and then they're seated right in the front row?
Oh, that's when, I mean, honestly, that is a funny question. You would suddenly have a lot of, they'd be like, so what's the thing happening on the mall again?
Yeah. Maybe we'll have to talk to Poly Markets about who might curse who. Trump the court or the court?
There's been some awkward moments between the justices and the president.
Oh, not just Trump, but remember Obama. I think it was Alito mouthed.
Yeah, Obama.
Yeah, mouthed, or it was Biden that Alito mouthed. I don't know if it was "F-you" or "you lie" or something.
No way, he didn't mouth that.
Oh no,
there was a "you lie" or something like that, but there was not an "F-you." That would be beyond the doubt.
All right, I'll Google it. Go ahead.
Let's Google it. We'll tee it up for next week.
What does the Google machine say?
Pre-show discussion. Let's take another question. Okay. Will accountability for Epstein abusers ever happen in the U.S. as it is all over Europe? Oh, this is just what we started with. Both Lutnick and Oz had contact with Epstein after his first arrest. The DOJ redacts names of abusers, holds on to more documents. Who is the DOJ protecting? Not Dems. They do perp walks so much. So must be ours. I mean, I'm trying to think where to start on this. I mean, we talked about it at the top. The optics for Lutnick aren't great, but like, what do you want? Like, you want him to get fired for having a conversation with his wife, even though he told podcasters he never did. I mean, yes, accountability is important, but like some of this stuff, I don't know what.
Well, I think
even Lutnick's critics don't think he should be resigned because of that.
Yeah. By the way, it was the 2010 State of the Union. Alito mouthed "not true" at Obama when he was talking about Citizens United. So just for all those history buffs, look, I think it's not true that CEOs and business leaders have not paid no price. Right. I mean, we just had what's his name, Pritzker, step down from running the Pritzker Family Investment Fund. I don't know if Casey Wasserman he's putting his talent agency up for sale as a result of Epstein. He may lose the chairmanship of the Olympics as a result of Epstein. But I think part of it here is, at least with Andrew, there are way more detailed specifics of inappropriate engagement. Whereas in the US, I think some of this is because of all the confidentiality agreements. There's simply they had a relationship with Epstein. Their line is, I wish I hadn't, but there isn't like that bombshell per se, where you would say, oh my God, Lutnick or whomever has got to go down. I mean, even the Clintons, right? There's pictures with girls with a bathing suit, but there is not. Whereas in Andrew's case, the allegation was, I had sex with that man, and he raped me, and et cetera. Now she's, she killed herself, but my wife and I were talking about this. There are subtle differences between here and there.
Right. And Andrew in particular held a position. He was doing some trade envoy type of work. And there's allegations this is what I understand the charges came down to, is that
correct.
He traded access and information. Again, I'm not the biggest expert on Epstein. So I say this because if people want to take
here.
But there is a difference between the optics, right? In Lutnick's case, to what Rachel was saying, look, Lutnick says, hey, I was with my wife and kids, and okay, so what's the charge? That it might be not look good, but he didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and I've said this before, go back, not trying to do a shameless plug because it doesn't it's aired, but go back and watch this thing I had a couple days ago with Dershowitz. The point that Dersh makes is that there's a lot of revisionist history over when Epstein was this bad person, right? So he goes to jail, and what was it that he went to jail for? The full extent of what we know Jeffrey Epstein to be now is not what we knew it to be. So what Dershowitz argues, and this is not his argument, not mine, is when you go back and ascribe all of the attributes that we know now of what Epstein did and is accused of to what happened in 2014, 2015, it's not necessarily a fair thing to say to somebody, he wasn't accused of this whole small girls peddling and trafficking that he was now. That was not what the case was. So associating with him back might have been a swarmy guy and a creepy dude, but we did not know what we know now back then. So when you associated with, as far as, again, when I look at the Dershowitz timeline, does matter.
Let's take another question. Oh, super chat here. Trump gold card mess, Sean's favorite topic. Record trade deficit and lying about Epstein. This is all about Lutnick. Why does Lutnick get such a long leeway versus other?
I mean, look, I will say I do, based on what I have seen, and I too am no Epstein expert, and there are plenty of them out there who are combing through these files. But from what I have seen, Lutnick's engagement with Epstein was with his family, both when he and his wife toured their new neighbor's house, and when he and his family was on vacation, and he said, hey, neighbor, you've always said if we were ever kind of down in the Caribbean, come on over. We're down here. My whole family can come over and have lunch. To my knowledge, that is all that is out there. If there is more, if there is whatever, we will see it. But in fairness to Howard, I don't see anything where you'd be like, hey, that was really bad judgment. And you really, look, I've had neighbors that I don't love, and when they've invited me over and I'm not comparing, somebody who's not friendly to
neighbors.
You never know who's watching. But Epstein stuff aside, this person is right that Lutnick is a controversial figure in the administration with people, certain other members of the administration. Sean, what can you tell us about his current position?
There's two things. I would say one, we'll see who bears the brunt if the Supreme Court does. And it's I've told you where I stand on this, and it's not it's just my layman's interpretation of how the court, I think, will read the constitutional responsibilities laid out in Article 1 versus Article 2. But I've had several people who make a very strong argument that the president does have the authority based on the arguments that they made, that there was a national emergency that they were writing. If that's the case and the court buys it, he's going to be in great shape, and Howard will be, his stature will climb because he was one of the principal architects of the strategy. If it does not, to the questioner's, issue here. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets worse, if people pile on because they say, you are the guys that wanted to use IEPA. We're in this mess now. And there's a lot of people that want to point fingers. But to answer the fundamental point of the question, part of it is that Howard has known the president for a long time. He's got a relationship with him. And that's a big thing in Trump 2.0 is that the relationships that Trump has with most of his cabinet members is very long-standing. It's very personal. So it's not like some person he met Friday and says, what's this guy doing? He knows them very well, very extensively. And I think that's definitely the case with Lutnick.
You should Google, I don't know the headline on it, but I did a piece about why Howard would probably not lose his job when everybody was saying he was going to get fired about a year ago. So maybe a little, like not quite a year ago. Basically, I mean, he has ice cream sundaes with the president like every Friday, right? Like down at Mar-a-Lago, like he flies down with him, he comes back. There is a personal relationship. And yes, it irks like other people in the administration who think, you know, sometimes he's whispering in the president's ear something he shouldn't and is not like playing well with the team, but that's hard to overcome. Relationships like that are hard to overcome to try to oust him. So let's take we're at time here actually. So well we'll do more tomorrow, guys. We'll be back at 8:30. Sean, you have anything you wanna flag?
At the panel. It's Thursday.
It's panel day, baby. We got a lot to cover, a lot to go down. Emily Sturge from Campus Reform, Ashley Brassfield from the Daily Caller, and Adam Guillet from Accuracy and Media. So we got a lot to break down tonight at 6. And by the way, last night's show, EJ Antoni, he was very measured. I think actually Dan would appreciate EJ's take on the economy because he was very, I thought very reasonable. No, well, just he was like, here's where it's good, here's where it needs to improve, here's what I would look for. And I was shocked for a guy that's, you know, so supposed, like he was just, I was very measured, I think was the way that I would look at it. And I thought it was very, very smart for people who care about the economy and who are banking on it as I am for political purposes to get an understanding of where it goes.
Nice.
Good. All right, guys. We'll see you guys tomorrow at 8:30.